Today I'll be demoing a web app that I'm very proud to have played a very small part in. Historically, when we talk about databases of antiquity, we're talking about multiple servers that are co-located in exactly the same server rack. We've moved on from there, and as the world seems to get smaller, our applications seem to get bigger. We're much more likely to have a global presence with our modern day businesses, and therefore we need to think about how to operate a database in a global setting. CockroachDB's geo-partitioning provides a very easy mechanism to serve up your data to a global audience in a way that makes sense to developers and is also safe for customers. In this demo, I'll show you how we harnessed a database that took 10 seconds to spin up and about 10 minutes to configure to create an application with global presence. We called the demo Silo to represent the physical localities of data and how we separated them. I'll get onto that in a bit. It first makes sense to touch on why you would even want a global database. There are many ways to create a database. You don't have to create a single global one, but we thought we would to demonstrate how it can be done. There are numerous database topologies that you can use with CockroachDB that all provide different benefits and costs depending on your workloads. In this demo, we install CockroachDB across 3 regions. We have one in Frankfurt, we have one on the east coast of the States, and we have one on the west coast of the States. These form one complete database. It is one single database, and we've implemented the application across 2 tables. These 2 tables span the globe, and we wanted to make it a visual representation of how data is stored. In this application, you'll create and display artwork, and I'll show you how in just a minute. Depending on where you are, you'll see different data, and that's because we've pinned data to specific locations. Data resides either within Europe or the States. Users outside of Europe will see data that's stored in the States, while users inside of Europe will see data that's stored within Europe. We've achieved this by wrapping the 2 regions in the States in what's called a super region. This allows the 2 regions to replicate data between one another, but they won't replicate data outside of that super region. It's the same for the EU. There's one region, we've wrapped it inside a super region, so it won't replicate data to the nodes in the States. And there's a number of components to this. We used Route 53 in AWS to create a geographically aware load balancer. Users in Europe will go one way, and users outside of Europe will go the other way. And ultimately, they land on a Lambda. The code between the Lambda in the States and Europe is identical. We've configured them with different environment variables, and depending on that environment variable, we'll serve up data for different locations. I'll sign in. We've got 2 options of signing in, either with LinkedIn or GitHub. I'll sign in with GitHub. So now we're in the heart of the application. This is where we'll create the artwork. And there are 4 areas that we can use to create our artwork. In the first area, we'll be creating artwork that will be physically stored in US East 1, North Virginia. That allows us to create different shapes. So I'll create some shapes here and provide color to them. We're taking colors from the US flags to give this artwork color. And we can also change the background of the image. These are all US specific images. Once we find an image we like, we can click save. And notice that the data has also been written to US West 2. The 2 are locked in a super region, so data will be replicated between the 2. Any changes that I make to here will be replicated up here. We can also change the background again if we wish, and save. Let's come over to Europe now. Artwork that we configure here will be physically stored in EU Central 1, Frankfurt. So like before, we can create artwork based on shapes. And like with the US flag, we'll take colours from flags in European nations to provide colour to EU artwork. I'll save that. You can also change the background for European art as well. Let's change the background to something else. Okay. And finally, you can provide data that will be globally available to all of your artwork. Let's select a background pattern. Now notice here that there's been a background pattern applied to the artwork. And because it's global, it's been applied to all of the artwork. Let's change the background pattern until we find something we like. Okay, I'll keep this one. We can also change 2 other elements of this. We can change the location of the cockroach logo, and we can change characteristics of the silo logo. So currently it's black text on a white background. Let's change it to white text on a black background and save that. Let's generate a preview of my artwork. This is how it will appear to other users. And notice that because I'm in Europe, I can only see my European data. If I wanted to see my US-based data, I'd have to be in the US. I'll jump onto a VPN and demonstrate what that looks like. So I'm just jumping onto a VPN in New York, and we'll see that when that updates, I can only see my US-based data. My EU data is no longer available to me. If I disconnect from my VPN, we'll see that very quickly, the application realizes that I'm back in the EU and it updates accordingly. And the last element of this app is the gallery. If you're based in Europe, it will show you artwork from other users in Europe. And if you're in the States, it will show you artwork from anywhere else in the world, including the States. So if I scroll down here, we can see artwork that's been configured by people in Europe. If I switch my VPN on again and make it look like I'm in New York, the application will realize that it needs to refresh and show me data from users in the States. Here we can see my artwork that I created for the States. This data is being physically served up from the US, and we can see artwork that's been configured by everyone who's outside of Europe. Let's take a look at the database now. It's very, very simple. We have one database we've called Silo, and in there are two tables. One is the Art Global table, which has a locality global flag. Values are configured in the front end and stored in a JSON blob column. This is the entire configuration for the Art Global table. Everything you see that's overlaid on the image, the Silo logo, the Cockroach logo, and the background pattern is all configured within this table. If we have a look at the Art Local table, we can see that the locality, instead of being global, is regional by row. And we partition that based on region, which is a CRDB internal region column. This allows us to say, for this data that has this particular region, physically store it in this location. And like the global table, this is the whole configuration for the table. There's nothing else. So hopefully by showing you this, you can appreciate how it only took around 10 minutes to create a global user experience in CockroachDB. To summarize, this has been a really fun project. By far and away, the easiest part of the project was the database. For something that takes 10 seconds to spin up and 10 minutes to configure, hopefully we've demonstrated how you can achieve things like regulatory compliance. If you need to physically pin data to a particular location, this is how you can do it. With the global tables topology, you can achieve very fast reads no matter where you are in the world. Data is replicated everywhere. At, of course, the cost of slower writes. Data needs to be replicated across regions, whereas the regional by row topology allows very fast reads and writes to your local region. This will be a long-lived app, so you can log in, have some fun, and create your own artwork. Visit cockroachlabs.com/demos/demo data residency and have a play yourself.